Bringing together the Twin Cities, Minnesota Housing, the county's Transit Improvement Board, Hennepin and Ramsey counties, and the McKnight Foundation, Minnesota's application had the right partners and the right vision for success, focusing on 5 major corridors to coordinate land use and development with transit investment. Fixing our economy won't happen overnight. After all, the disconnect between the places where people live and work results from decades of poor planning and misplaced priorities. As a result, the average American now spends 52 cents of every dollar they earn on housing and transportation costs alone. But by acting now, we can create jobs today. We can ensure parents spend less time driving and more time at home with their kids, that more families live in safe, stable communities near good schools and jobs, and that more Minnesota businesses have access to capital and the talent that they need to grow and prosper. Above all, we can lay the foundation for sustainable economic prosperity for generations to come. Of course, at the same time we start helping communities that share problems start sharing solutions at the regional level, you only need look at foreclosure patterns to recognize the challenges communities face at the neighborhood level as well. Through 3 rounds, HUD's awarded nearly $7 billion in neighborhood stabilization funds to help communities struggling with concentrated foreclosures turn vacant and abandoned homes into the affordable housing that families need. But as anyone who's helping fix up REO properties and stop neighborhood decline knows, the challenge with NSP isn't just the dollars. It's the capacity of local governments and agencies that have been devastated by budget cuts. It's having to establish individual relationships with each different financial institution and negotiate the best price one house at a time. That's why we're providing the tools to localities that help them turn a crisis into an opportunity, so that at the same time that you address pressing problems like foreclosures, you're also able to really reimagine the future of your communities. That's why we've encouraged NSP grantees to partner with the third sector of nonprofits and community development corporations, who not only know how to solve neighborhood problems, but in many places have become our most innovative affordable housing developers and some of our most important civic institutions. And it's why I announced in September the historic First Look, a partnership between HUD, the National Community Stabilization Trust, and the nation's leading financial institutions, helping communities across the country purchase vacant properties quickly at a discount and before they hit the open market. You only need look at a city like Minneapolis to understand just how effective this wholesale strategy can be. Working with the trust, Minneapolis was able to buy up 260 properties in targeted neighborhoods, which they're beginning to rehabilitate to green standards and sell to responsible homeowners through a local down payment program. With a $5.6 million investment from the federal government in the first round of NSP, the Twin Cities Community Land Bank leveraged an additional $30 million in resources and the partnership of for-profit developers. It was that success that led us at HUD to award the Twin Cities another $38 million in the second round of NSP. And as a result, in the most heavily foreclosure-impacted neighborhoods in a community like North Minneapolis and others, home prices are gaining and private market recovery is underway. What makes this approach to NSP unique isn't just that we're working with different servicers or buyers, but rather a belief that federal investments can be game-changing, market-driven, and cost-effective. Game-changing in the sense that instead of just buying the next 10 or 20 distressed properties that become REO across an entire city or county, we can help communities selectively pick the most strategically important properties. Market-oriented in the sense that instead of working with a few REO servicers, we can work with financial institutions who manage 75% of the nation's REO. Cost-effective in the sense that instead of using a staff-intensive, one-off property acquisition approach, our partners have access to automated, state-of-the-art mapping and property management tools. So communities can spend less time and energy thinking about spending taxpayer dollars and more on getting the most out of them. Now, having been a local housing official, I know all too well that game-changing, market-oriented, and cost-effective may not be terms normally associated with HUD in the past. But with new partners and new tools, we're committed to ensuring every community in America will in the years to come. Of course, when most people hear the term sustainability, they think of environmental sustainability. But this audience knows full well that you can't have a sustainable community if you have an underlying system that promotes segregated development patterns and isolated poverty. By now, many of you are familiar with HUD's Choice Neighborhoods initiative, which builds on and improves the legacy of Hope 6 by bringing to bear private capital and mixed-use, mixed-income development tools to transform not only public housing, but all housing in a neighborhood. Just as importantly, it will make the nonprofits and the private sector who participated in Hope 6 full partners in this transformation. But everyone in this room knows that public housing won't be remade with a handful of grants each year. Right now, America's public housing program faces a backlog of unmet capital needs as high as $30 billion. The challenge isn't limited to public housing. Older programs that subsidize tens of thousands of units lack any real strategy that would help keep them affordable for the years to come. Already, our country has lost 150,000 units of public housing in the last 15 years. 10,000 homes a year, every year for 15 years. That's why President Obama and I have proposed a 21st century strategy to preserve affordable housing for America's most vulnerable families that we call transforming rental assistance. I'm proud that we were able to provide an additional $4 billion in public housing capital funding as part of the Recovery Act last year. It was one of the most critical parts of the Recovery Act. But let's be clear. That funding at best meets a fifth of the estimated capital backlog in public housing properties. And given the size of the federal deficit and the very difficult fiscal environment that lies ahead, it's clear the federal government will not be able to finish the job alone. And failing to finish the job means the billions the government has invested in public and assisted housing over the last 70 years will be lost forever. The programs touched by TRA house over 4 million households, nearly two-thirds of which are extremely low income, and 2.5 million of whom are elderly or disabled. That's why we're proposing to shift the current public housing capital and operating subsidies to a single rental subsidy stream that will attract capital from private and other public sources, $7 billion alone in the first year, and $25 billion in all. That's $25 billion that's sitting on the sidelines right now that could be invested in public housing but can't be because of antiquated rules that were developed nearly a half century ago. At the same time, TRA would infuse our public housing system with the capital it needs to preserve this housing. It would also improve the system in three key ways. The first is simplicity. Right now, HUD has 13 different deep rental assistance programs, each with its own rules, administered by 3 different operating divisions that contract with more than 20,000 separate entities. No one would ever intentionally set up a system this complicated. And we've seen how this proliferation of programs and delivery systems makes your job providing housing to families much, much harder and wastes money as well. You know, no insult to lawyers in the room, and my mother is one, but there are better ways we can spend our money housing families than the incredibly complex deals that we put together, the soft costs we see, the months and years spent waiting to get affordable housing online. Many of our nation's public housing authorities have become real innovators and entrepreneurs. But the barriers this system throws up to using other financing streams and working with social service providers makes you do that job with one hand tied behind your back. The time has come to make our programs easier to use so that our local partners can focus more on the needs of your communities and less on complying with inflexible, one-size-fits-all rules. The time has come for the federal government to get its own house in order. The second principle is choice. Today, too many residents of public and assisted housing can't move to a different neighborhood to find a better job or further their education because moving means giving up their subsidy. That's simply not right. TRA reflects our belief that families should be able to choose where they live without fear of losing rental assistance. The third principle is community. Everyone in this room knows that you can't have a truly sustainable community if you have a system that promotes segregation and isolation. But quite frankly, that's what our current system does too often. And to be clear, that's not the fault of our PHAs. It's because most families live in housing that's financed, developed, and managed in a way that can be integrated with the communities around them, while the 2.5 million poor families served by HUD's oldest programs don't. TRA will put an end to the parallel housing system in America by encouraging a mix of uses and incomes that link public housing to investments in neighborhood schools, local businesses, and other community anchors. Just as importantly, the renovation it would spur, we estimate, would create 300,000 jobs, building and preserving affordable housing in the communities that need it most, and providing jobs for the people that need them most. I believe, and President Obama believes, that we can do better. And thank goodness that someone like Congressman Ellison does as well. At the panel following my remarks, the Congressman and I will discuss his legislation that builds on and refines the administration's proposal and says once and for all that we will do better. Reflecting months of listening to the people who know our public housing best, he's made critical changes to our proposal, from ironclad protections to maintain public ownership and requirements for properties to remain permanently affordable, to a more workable resident choice option and the strong, fair resident rights families who live in these properties deserve. And I'll be discussing them more in detail with him at the next panel. I hope you'll be there. Over half a century ago, in 1954, the Warren Court's unanimous decision in Brown versus Board of Education stated that, quote, separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, end quote. Well, a separate housing system for low-income families is also inherently unequal. Let's work together. Let's work together to complete this unfinished business of the civil rights movement and ensure that all our families can live in sustainable, vibrant communities of opportunity and choice. For me, for President Obama, for Congressman Ellison, Senator Franken, and so many of you here today, it all comes down to a very simple belief that when you choose a home, you don't just choose a home. You also choose schools for your children and transportation to work. You choose a community and the choices available in that community. A belief that our children's futures should never be determined or their choices limited by the zip code that they grow up in. Like our president, I know change is never easy, that revitalizing our nation's communities won't happen overnight, nor will it happen because of any one policy or the work of any one agency or one party. But working together, in common purpose, in partnership, we can tackle our toughest challenges. We can push back on this crisis. We can build upon the remarkable sense of change and possibility you're catalyzing right here in communities across this state. And most important of all, we can create a true geography of opportunity for every American. Ensuring that we do is our shared goal today. Let us rise to meet it. Thank you.